Good morning, girls. It's Miss Ferguson, and it is Tuesday, May 12th, 2020. So today we're going to be using the strategy understanding figurative language and idioms in a text. The text we are working with in class, as you know, is the Hope Chest, and we'll continue doing so today. And you'll be using the Hope Chest as well as this lesson to answer some independent practice questions in your packet. But first, let's talk about figurative language, what that means, and the different types of figurative language that an author uses and that we need to be able to understand as readers. We're going to be talking about similes, metaphors, hyperbole, personification, onomatopoeia, idioms, and alliteration. So, what is figurative language? Figurative language is used to describe an object, person, or situation by comparing it to or with something else. For example, he is as busy as a bee, describes or compares a hardworking boy to a busy bee. Figurative language is simply a way to add excitement to what is otherwise a bland statement, like, he is busy. Let's take a look at the different types of figurative language and their definitions and some examples. First, let's talk about similes. Similes use the word like or as to compare two things as being similar. For example, he is happy as a pig in mud compares the way a boy feels to the way a pig does when it is in mud. Here's some similes you may have heard: as blind as a bat, as brave as a lion, as clear as mud, as cold as ice, as tall as a giraffe. I'd like you to write down on the paper that you're taking notes on, because I know that you are, what you think these similes mean. Now, we've talked about similes, so what is a metaphor? A metaphor suggests that something or someone actually becomes or is something else. For example, she is a monster describes how the girl is behaving. So where a simile uses like or as, metaphors make it seem like something actually becomes something else. So instead of saying she is like a monster, a metaphor would say she is a monster. And that's describing her behavior. So here's some metaphors you may have heard before. My heart is broken. It's raining cats and dogs. The classroom was a zoo. He is a night owl. You are my sunshine. What do you think those metaphors mean? When someone says, my heart is broken, what does that mean? Someone says, well, he's a night owl. What do they mean by that statement? So, what do you think these metaphors mean? Another type of figurative language is what we call hyperbole. A hyperbole is a statement so exaggerated that no one believes it to be true. Hyperboles are used to make a point. For example, I have a million things to do is saying that you are extremely busy with jobs to do. Here's some examples of hyperboles you may have seen or heard before. It was so cold, I saw polar bears wearing jackets. I'm so hungry, I could eat a horse. Her brain is the size of a pea. That new car costs a bazillion dollars. He is as skinny as a toothpick. So what do we think those hyperboles mean? Remember, a hyperbole is something that is so exaggerated. So if they're saying it was so cold I saw a polar bear wearing jackets, then we know they're probably saying it's really, 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 really cold because polar bears like the cold. So if they're cold, we know it's gotten really freezing outside. Or that new car costs a bazillion dollars. We know that bazillion isn't an amount of money we talk about. People usually say it when they're trying to make a point that it's a lot of money. Now, for your practice on your paper at home, let's see if you can take these plain, kind of bland, boring statements and turn them into hyperboles. So, for each of these four examples, I want you to give me a hyperbole that you could make instead. So instead of it is hot, an example someone might say is, it was so hot I could fry an egg on the ground. So what's an example you could think of? An exaggerated statement about how hot it is. What about it is cold? How could you turn that into a hyperbole? The food was good. How could you say that in an exaggerated way? I had lots of homework. How could you make that kind of bland statement into a hyperbole that sounds a little more exciting? I want you to figure those out on your own and write them down because you'll be sharing those with me later. Another example of figurative language is personification. Personification gives animals or objects human-like characteristics. For example, an expression such as, these flowers are crying out for water, tells us that the flowers really need to be watered, but also implies that they have a voice, a human characteristic. Personification used in this way gives the situation urgency. So here are some examples of personification. Lightning danced across the sky. Well, dancing is something that humans do. It's a human characteristic. So if we're saying lightning danced across the sky, it's a more exciting way to say that lightning was moving across the sky. Traffic slowed to a crawl. Well, cars can't crawl, but we know that a baby that's crawling is moving pretty slow. So if traffic slowed to a crawl, it's the author's way of telling us that, man, that traffic really slowed down. The wind howled. What do you think that means? If the wind howled, what is the author saying? And the sun smiled. What do you think the author is saying here? What do they mean by the sun smiled? How is personification used in this particular poem? My dinner loves dancing. My food loves to prance, to jump, to dance. I wait for the time, I wait for the chance. As mommy goes in and out of the room, tables and chairs become their ballroom. I flick my fingers, swing my wrist. Beans and turkey are doing the twist. Peas, plums, apples, or mangoes. On to the walls, they're doing the tango. Onomatopoeia is a word that mimics the sound of the object or action it refers to. When you pronounce a word, it will mimic its sound. For example, here are some words that sound like the animal when they are spoken. Ribbit, roar, ah. Here are some words that sound like actions we make when spoken. Achoo, ahem, yawn. Here's some examples of onomatopoeia. The sheep went baa. The chickens were clucking. The girl jumped in the pool and made a splash. The boy slurped his spaghetti. Idioms. An idiom is a word or phrase that means something different from its literal meaning. The expressions don't exactly mean what the words say. For example, to say someone hit the roof means they got very angry. It doesn't mean they actually hit the roof. Here are some common idioms. It was a piece of cake. It slipped my mind. I'll give it a shot. Cross your fingers. Let's call it a day. What do you think these common idioms mean? Remember, they don't mean what the words literally say. So it was a piece of cake isn't talking about a slice of dessert. So what do we mean when we use idioms such as these? I want you to write down what you think each of these means. Alliteration. Alliteration is when words that start with the same sound are used close together in a phrase or sentence. The sound is usually a consonant. The words don't have to always be right next to one another. An example would be ants on an apple, as the same consonant sound is being used repetitively. Here are some examples of alliteration. Wiggly worm, lazy lizards, lying like lumps, Coca-Cola, Mickey Mouse. So girls, these are common forms of figurative language that authors use. Figurative language helps spice up what the author is saying. Instead of just coming out and saying it is cold, the author might use figurative language to say that in a way that is more exciting to us as readers. So today in your independent practice, you're going to be rereading the Hope Chest Chapter 1, and you're going to be using Chapter 1 to identify the meaning of some different figurative language phrases. So that's what you'll be doing today. Have a great day, girls, and I will talk to you soon.